Hi, I'm Ralph Preston. Guess what? It's Tuesday morning at 11 o'clock Eastern Time, and here we are again. All of us stroke buddies gathered together for another Tuesday support group meeting. And today we've got David A. Grant. David is a TBI, traumatic brain injury survivor. I'll let him tell his story. He's another one of us, what I call pay it forward stroke survivors. He's spent the last 12 years since his accident trying to make it easier on the next person and building Brain Injury Hope Network, which is now around 35,000 people. That's impressive, because I know how impressive that is, because I'm pushing 20 and it's taken me over 6 years. So, without further ado, I'm going to ask David to tell us a little bit about his TBI story and how that got him to the work that he's doing today. So, welcome, David.
Thank you, Ralph, and thank you for your kind words, the kind introduction, and for everything you're doing. You know, when I didn't when I was a younger man take a look at my vision for my future and say maybe I'll be a brain injury advocate. You know, I initially thought about going to school to be an architect and some other things along the way, but never did you know, that whole brain injury piece crossed my mind. And interestingly, until I sustained my own injury, I never knowingly met another brain injury survivor. I can look back in my life with people that I had crossed paths with that had severe auto accidents. There's a gentleman that I'm thinking of that I knew for many years, uh, who I can identify now clearly as a brain injury survivor, but it was so far off the my radar when it happened. You know, there's another one of those memes that's out there that says a brain injury is the last thing you think about until it's the only thing you think about. And but
True.
yeah, you know, the short version, I'm an endurance cyclist. I love biking. I did my hour this morning. I hit 60 last year, and I'm committed to you know, staying as healthy as I can for as long as I can. And back in my late 40s, I was pushing out about 2 hours a day of cycling, and I was on a very familiar road. And I came up to an intersection that I had been to 100 or more times. And this is actually bringing up a lot of discomfort. My life today is very different now than it was early on. And it doesn't matter whether you're a traumatic brain injury survivor or a stroke survivor, the beginning always sucks. It's a big bag of suck. And I've lost some of my filter, and I'm more inclined to say what I feel. But none of us expects to have to relearn so much of our lives. And but I get to the intersection, and wearing bright neon clothes, reflective cycling shoes. You know, stopped at the intersection. I looked to the left, looked to the right, gave one push, and the next thing I knew, I was airborne. It's coming up on the 12-year anniversary. November 10th or 11th will be the 12-year anniversary, and I get hit, and it's like time kind of slowed down a little bit. I remember flying through the air, and I didn't find out until a year afterwards that I was knocked unconscious. During that first year, if you'd asked, I, you know, laid on the pavement while the first responders came. But I had somebody in a similar interview say, you know, tell me what happened, and I said I opened my eyes and I was surrounded by people, and the comment was, do you think they just materialized? And in that moment, I realized that I had lost consciousness. But I opened my eyes, and there were the first responders all around me. I was about 2 blocks from the Main Street fire station, and they literally shut down our main street. And there's a fire engine, a police car or two, an ambulance. A bunch of the guys from the station walked over, and there was a passerby that stopped, and I was at the time calling out my wife Sarah's cell phone number to let somebody just please call her to let her know that what had happened. And the passerby had his hand over his mouth and he was weeping. And in that moment, with the first responders all around and somebody in tears, came the realization that it may be my fate to die here on Main Street. And that's not really, that wasn't my plan for that day. My wife and I were married, second time for both of us. We had just celebrated our 1-year anniversary a couple of months earlier. We got married with 8 children between us and came back from our honeymoon to 5 teenagers in the house. And we had finally got to the point of kind of gelling, like we were coming together and we were falling into just a regular life routine. And then I got hit. And here's the passerby weeping. And I still had my, it was November, so it was cold. So I call it my head sock. But I unhooked my helmet and took it off, and took off my head sock and said, "What do you see? What do you see?" And they did the standard, just stay calm, stay calm. And like they did with you, Ralph, they hooked me up to the bodyboard in the event that I had a broken bone in my back, and they rushed me down across state lines to a trauma center. And that I always think about that line. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And I started doing an assessment, and I remember moving my fingers and going, okay, I can move my hands. So, so far so good. And I remember wiggling my toes, going, okay, I can move my feet, and kind of doing a mental checklist. Okay, I'm not paralyzed, so I'm not going to be, relegated to a life in a wheelchair. And they brought me down to the trauma center, and a passerby, and I still remember his first name. His name was Jim, called Sarah and said, "Your husband's, he's been in a really bad accident, and they're taking him by ambulance to down to the Lawrence General Hospital." And I don't know how the pieces fit together, but she hopped in her car and ended up behind the ambulance. She didn't live in this area for long, so she was unfamiliar with the area. Serendipity, the hand of God, I don't know, but she ended up behind the ambulance. And the first really horrific moment was am I going to die today? And when I went, you know what, I'm probably not going to die. I was in the back of the ambulance. I had the light on, and I was still calling out her cell phone number, kind of on redial. And one of the first responders called from inside the ambulance and basically said, "Hey, just follow us." And mentally, if I bring myself back to the place of her driving behind the ambulance, like, my wife and I like each other. We're good fits. We just, I went into her office this morning and I said, we've had our fair share of shit in our lives, and pardon my profanity, but thank God we have each other. And we both smiled. I gave her a hug, and we started our day that way. And the thought of her in the car behind the ambulance, not knowing, like, is my husband going to live? Is he going to die? It was horrible. And they got me down to the trauma center, and they wanted to give me intravenous morphine, and I didn't want that, so they gave me like intravenous Advil to take the pain off. I was howling like a cat in the back of the ambulance, and when they pulled me out, I can still picture with stunning clarity the inside of R3, the ambulance. It's like teak wood with the very bright little lights, and you've seen it, I'm sure. And when they pulled me out, because I was strapped down, I could only look straight up, and I saw Sarah's face, and it was all swollen, and she had the tears on her face. And one of the things, and I'd ask for a show of hands, who uses dark humor to survive? We talk about things that would offend sensible people these days, but humor is healing. And I was, they wheeled me out, and for whatever reason, the line from a Charlie Brown Christmas, and behold, the face of an angel, and it's Linus in that little special. And then they whisked me in, and they did their assessment, did a they did a CAT scan, they did some X-rays, and they found a broken bone in my arm. I was covered in cuts from the glass shards. I went right through his windshield. I found out a year later through a serendipitous conversation that I ended up pushing the windshield in so far that had somebody been in the passenger seat, they would have been gravely injured. The husband of one of my brain injury support group cohorts turned out to be one of the responding police officers on scene and was able to tell me things that I didn't know happened. And they wanted to keep me overnight. That the CAT scan showed no damage, and they said, we're going to keep you for observation. And I said, hospitals are for the sick and the infirmed, and I am neither. I'm out of here. And it was one of my first documented executive function challenges. I wanted no part of being in the hospital, and they tried with what resources and persuasiveness they had to keep me in there. If you leave, your insurance may not cover it, and you may have something happen. You may have a post-injury brain bleed. And I'm like, just get me out of here. I want to go home. And the next day, I was tasked with going to a orthopedist, and they casted my arm, put a boot on my foot. I still have memory challenges, so sometimes they get repetitive. But for several days afterwards, Sarah had tweezers, and she was pulling pieces of glass out of my scalp. It was horrific. And I went for a neurologist appointment, and he did an assessment. They did what's called the Montreal cognitive test. 14 questions. Sarah still knows the questions and most of the answers. I can't tell you one of them. And he gave me a high five and said, "Congratulations, you've dodged a bullet. You don't have any no nothing, no injury, no nothing." And I jokingly say, "Don't forget to pay the receptionist on the way out. Have a great life." And we left happy. And I was a sight to behold for quite a while. And over time, and I'll try and speed it up. Over time, my physical injuries healed, but I knew I wasn't right on the inside. And I can't explain it better than that. I'm not right. Something's not right. And I was, that would have been November. In January, I bake, I hang out with a bunch of friends on Wednesday night, and I'm known as Baker David. I bake about 500 pounds of brownies a year for my friends. They were always very happy to see me. And I make amazing brownies. And that's what I've been told. And I went to, I pulled out the brownie box in January, and I literally instantly had lost the ability to read. And I'm looking at the box going, I know these characters mean something, but I couldn't put them in, I couldn't translate the alphabet to words. And the analogy that I like to use, it's like stepping off a subway in Beijing, and all the signs are written in Chinese and Chinese characters. And they mean words, but you have no idea what they mean. And we called up the neurologist, and he got us in for an emergency appointment. And he said, "Yep, you've had a concussion." And my big thing wasn't so much when am I going to read again? It's when am I going to be normal again? Like, when am I going to feel like myself? Because there was some primal shift in me that I just still was struggling to understand. And at the time, he said, it may be 90 days, it may be 6 months, but you recover to 100%. Don't worry. And pay the receptionist on the way out. And so, I'm a big believer. And Ralph, I know you are, because I've met a few people that have experienced post-traumatic growth, and they take a look at what life has given them. They work through it and say, how do I serve humanity and the greater good? And but I wasn't there then. Can I use a little profanity, or would that be offensive?
No, you go ahead.
Okay.
Say whatever you want.
I was a walking shit show. I just I still have trouble with my filter, but sometimes I learned from a non-injured friend that profanity is a very good way to really paint a picture of the way things were. The PTSD had kicked in right away. I jumped into immediate, abysmally hard nightmares. My wife and I were both not sleeping. 3-4 bad nights a week. You're walking around like you have a newborn in the house. I live about 2 blocks from an ancillary fire station, and anytime an ambulance went by, I'd hit my knees. I'd go to Jello. I'd start crying. And I didn't realize at the time I had PTSD. My verbal filter was shredded, and I became an embarrassment to take out for quite a while. Normally, if you go to the 12 items or less line and somebody's got 14, civil people make note of it, but don't say anything. But when you've got no filter, I'd look to Sarah and go, he's got 14 items that I don't care if they're freaking Jello. He shouldn't be. And I was an embarrassment. And I look at that today and like, I'm ashamed by that, even though it's not my fault and it's part of the journey. And so we kind of bumbled along, and and I was given the 90-day to 6-month recovery, and we went, we know what I have, and we've got a timeline. So that was in January that the ability to read disappeared. In March, I went out for a bike ride. It took me a year to get out of my neighborhood. Such was the grip of the PTSD. And but I went out for a bike ride, and at the time, I had a little counter that told me my miles, and I was still trying for 30 miles a day. And I'm like, I was 2 blocks from home, and it's just freaky stuff. I remember going, this is going to be a really nice ride. It's a good day for a ride. The weather's getting nice, just snow on the ground, the roads are dry. And I looked at my ride calculator, and I'd already gone 23 miles. No memory. I thought I was out of my house for 5 minutes, and I totally freaked out. I'm like, what just happened to the last 90 minutes? And I like layperson's descriptions of my challenges. I don't like a lot of the medical jargon. And it was like having my mind be a camera with no film. It looked like it would work, but it wasn't recording any memories. So I got home, and I wasn't psychotic, but I remember looking around because the whole thing was so surreal. I'm like, oh my God, I must be in a coma. And like, this is a reality that my mind is manufacturing while I'm laying in a hospital bed somewhere, because it doesn't compute. It doesn't make sense. And I came in and I laid down, and I remember touching a bush outside of my door going, wow, this fake reality is looking really real. And I fell asleep, and I never sleep during the daytime. So we called the neurologist again, went in. So this would have been 5 months after my accident. And the CAT scan, by the way, showed no damage. One of the professionals along the way said probably what happened is you had microbial damage, and you had these later term symptoms as your damage was beginning its inevitable progress towards scar tissue. And that makes sense. Is it true? I have no idea, but it's kind of the way I look at it now. And when I went in the final time to that neurologist, he said, well, you've got a really bad concussion, David. And I'm thinking, no shit, you think? And he also gave me the first official PTSD diagnosis. And I said, and the cry was always the same, when am I going to be normal? And he said, the timeline's a little longer, but you're going to be normal again in 5 years. And like, a lot of people may be discouraged by that, but I'm like, 5 years when you're 49, 5 years goes kind of fast. And at least, the light at the end of the tunnel wasn't a train, and I had some hope. And those who know me know that I'm a really big believer in sharing hope, realistic hope these days. And so we left, and he said, I'll get you the name of a really good doctor in Boston, because here in Southern New Hampshire, the mistaken perception is all the good doctors are in Boston. And so we left that visit. Don't forget to pay the receptionist on the way out, and waited. And he never called. And I didn't reach back out to him. Before I left, he showed me his business card and said, I can't help you anymore. He said, what you have isn't even on my card, so we'll find you the help you need. And at the time, I literally couldn't match my socks. I was trying to get my legs back underneath me. I had no idea what I had. I knew that things were gravely different. My personality had shifted dramatically. Sarah, at one point, and it's one of the heartbreaking touch points along the way, said it feels like she's been married to 2 different husbands, husband 1 and husband 2. And she said a while ago, she said, thankfully, I really like husband 2. And I've, any of you guys know, like that's not always the case for us. That's not always the case. And but she didn't know what we had either. And I'd reached out at one point to the Brain Injury Association of New Hampshire asking to see if there was a concussion support group. And the nearest one they had was a 60-mile round trip, and that just wasn't practical. And they reached out to me a short time later and said, we're starting a new one um, right around the corner from your home. Rehab, I could walk there in 10 minutes. And I was a charter member of that group. And if I look back over the last 12 years, that was a pivotal point in the process. I walked into a room and there was one guy sitting there and he looked normal. And I posted a question the other day to the social group that I administer that was basically, and I always try to be mindful of everyone because within the Hope Network, we uh, are welcoming, meaning me, are welcoming to any brain injury survivor, anoxic brain injury, stroke survivor, traumatic brain injury survivor, acquired brain injury survivor. But I said, for those of you who have an injury that's invisible, don't you wish that like you could have a big sign that said, hey, I have a brain injury? And I don't know, I get like 65 comments on that saying, me too. Yeah, me too. I wish that too. And, but I walked in, there was a guy sitting there and he looked normal. And I'm like, oh, I can't be in the right place. And Don said, oh, if you're looking for people that have a problem up here, you're in the right place. And I attended that group regularly for 5 or 6 years. I became a co-facilitator of that group. And for the first year, we joked about having a box of Kleenex on the table because a lot of us had injuries at about the same time. And that box of Kleenex went up and down the table as we all cried. And we were going through ambiguous loss and ambiguous grief, mourning the death of the person, people that we used to be in the lives that we used to live. And I made some really good friends there. And once a month, we get together and just talk shop about life after brain injury. And I found that I would look forward to the meetings, but there was this big giant 29 or 30-day hole where like I'm back out bumbling along going, oh my God, I'm back in the world of normal people. And I am just so lost. And my personal belief is that there's something bigger than all of us out there. I don't really have a name for it, but there's a power behind the universe. Some people call it God, some people call it a higher power, Buddha, Allah, just a positive energy in the universe. I don't name it. There's something, my belief, there's something bigger than all of us. And some of us get tapped on the shoulder to do things that we might not have otherwise done. And so I went, we've got this 1 month window between contact with each other. And we clearly benefit by spending time in each other's company. So I started a small Facebook community just for the members of the group. And we touch base. It was called Faithful Friends. And we touch base periodically. And, how's your week going? And it was just a way to continue what we were doing on the once a month face-to-face meetings. And I had the light bulb go on over my head. And I said, if it's helping us, it might help others. So I started giving thought to maybe starting a non-private group just to help other people that share our faith. And the intent was to do nothing more than kind of be create a space where people who needed to be around others could go and be safe and be validated and maybe learn and just know that they're not alone. And so I initially started, it was called the Tbi Hope Network. And I started a community on Facebook. And if you'd asked me where, that was in 2013. It was January of 2013. We're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of that group. And I'm going to throw some type of digital party when it's the 10 years. Because everybody loves a party, even if it's digital cake. And started that group. And I like to remain teachable. And it's funny, one of the examples that I used is early on, I thought everybody had a traumatic brain injury. Like that was it. Like that's the only flavor of ice cream in the brain injury club. And the members of the community have taught me and they've guided me. And they've given me insight that has helped me to better serve more people. And a couple of years ago, we dropped TBI from all of the anything forward facing, except for the web address, because we're ranked very well with Google. And I'll get off. I won't go on the technical, boring stuff of domain name longevity. But we rebranded as the Brain Injury Hope Network. Welcome to anybody who's had a brain injury of any kind. And for the first couple of years, I had folks that would say, "Hey, I've had a stroke. Can I be part of the community?" And now it's forward facing. I post content periodically that's specific for stroke survivors, specific for anoxic brain injury survivors. I try to keep the hoop very big and very inclusive. And nobody's more surprised than me. If we look at where we are today, it's, almost, we're creeping up on 40,000 members, 36, 37,000. And I'm back to work full time again. Actually, I've kind of scaled back, but I ended up getting back to work full time. I'm pulling in the reins a little bit on that, but I do jobs that require me to analyze data, and again, it's not part of what I should be talking about today. But we average between 250,000 and 500,000 user engagements a month, with a little sparks fire between brain injury survivors. Before the pandemic, in Brain Injury Awareness Month, we got just under 1 million user engagements over the course of that month. The pandemic changed things a little bit. And like, I'm looking going, oh my God, like it was a spark and now it's a wildfire. And so, yeah, that's kind of where we've gone on the social side of things. And I try to maintain an air of um, uh, gentle service and guidance to that community. I like to consider myself the Wizard of Oz, the guy behind the green curtain. Occasionally I'll post personal things, but 90% of what I post has nothing to do with David. It keeps me humble. A number of years ago, we started Brain Injury Hope magazine, and put that out there to the brain injury community. A lot of folks have trouble with this, with being in front of a monitor, with being in front of a display. And it's just another way to put the message of hope out there in a tangible format. It's a free publication digitally, and there's a nominal charge. I think the royalties are like $1 a copy on Amazon. It doesn't even cover the overhead that we have for the things that we do. My wife and I do that pretty much out of pocket, but it just puts the information in front of more people. And interestingly, and I could go on and on, at some point you'll probably want to reel me in. But it took me 7 years to get back to, it took me some of the milestones. It took me 3 years to be able to read again. I could read, but I couldn't remember what I read. So I was a consummate reader for many years, 2 or 3 books on my night table. Which story do I want to jump back into tonight? And it took me a little better than 3 years to be able to read again. It took me 7 years to get back to work full time. At a year out, I went through very extensive neuropsych testing, and a well-respected area neurologist said, "You're permanently disabled. Don't ever try to learn anything new. Your IQ was clearly high before your injury, so you're going to be relegated to an average life. And good luck. And by the way, don't forget to pay the receptionist on the way out." And I said, Doc, I said, I want to come back in a year and I want to use today's neuropsych testing as my benchmark and see next year where I am and the year after. And he looked at me and he said, "There's no need, because most of your growth is going to happen in your first year. So you don't need to come back." And that one was a tough blow, because at a year out, I was still a bag of worms. And I've, I give everybody mulligans. And he was just repeating what he learned in school. I have no bitterness or animosity, because that's not healthy inside for me. But he was repeating by rote what he'd learned in medical school probably 30 years earlier. And I moved into a different direction with my career. These days I do search engine marketing primarily. I do web design, but I do things that require cognitive, the ability to have high cognitive function. And they're things that I did not do before my brain injury. And in many respects, I feel like a savant. I do things now that I wasn't capable of doing before. Now I can look at a complex data set and go, "Oh, here are the items that are noteworthy," and look at things and understand kind of at a granular level. And again, I say humble about it, but because of the work that I do, I help clients earn a whole lot of money. When the pandemic struck, I reassessed my life and decided it's time to slow down a little. And a couple of months ago, I actually clocked my hours, and I work about 20 hours a week. And I had a conversation with my wife maybe a month ago. And I said, I've got a little more time and I want to start taking a look at new things that we can do to help others. I'm looking at possibly creating an online database of mentors where you can sign up as a brain injury old timer and say, look, I'm willing to be available for newbies that have questions, kind of following the same model of anybody who's familiar with 12-step recovery with the sponsor-sponsee mentorship model. And just looking at, I was out riding today, I do an hour of cardio a day, thinking maybe I'll try my hand at digital cartooning and bring a cartoon into the publication, just different things because I have time to do them now that help elevate the quality of lives for others. And that line, a rising tide lifts all ships. I do these things with my own best interests in the back burner. I don't say, it's going to help me because I don't roll that way. But I have found over the years that, like the St. Francis prayer says, it's in giving that we receive, and it's in self-forgetting that we find. And I find that if I'm more focused on, how can I help humanity? I'm not thinking about my stuff, you know. Last night was a really terrible night. I won't get into the details because I don't know if there's anybody here with PTSD, but you talked about killing somebody repeatedly. I've been harmed in so many ways over the years that I've lost count. It's appalling stuff. It's horrific stuff. It makes last night made a bad Stephen King novel look like kindergarten fodder. And I accept that it's what I get, and I try to frame it, in this can be an asset because I now understand better the struggles of others. One quick point, and then I'll wind down a little bit. I lost the ability to speak clearly, and during the early part of my first year. I talk for a living. I'm a social guy. My mom, we lost her to the effects of a brain injury in 2019. She had a stroke. She spent her last year in a long-term care facility with no idea where she was. Her momness, strokes are such wild and woolly things. It's like flavors of Skittles. I'd walk into her room, she'd still recognize me, but she thought she was in a 5-star resort. At the hand of God there, and except for the last couple of months, her last year was pretty good. But I look at the things that happen and go, how can I possibly use these to help somebody else? And the first year I lost the ability to speak, and I was going with that. I'm better at putting the train back on the tracks when I lose it. For the first many years, the train would go out here and it would never come back. My mom was very gregarious and outgoing and friendly. She's a school teacher. I have friends that had her as a teacher, and they said, "Oh my God, Mrs. Grant was the best teacher ever." And I got her talking gene. And to go from that to being afraid to speak because I may say something stupid, and I still to this day, if I'm talking to somebody for a while and Sarah's there, afterwards I'll say, did I put my foot in my mouth? Did I say anything stupid? Because I've got that insecurity that comes with not being confident like I used to be. And she generally says no. But I couldn't put more than a few words together without a stammer or a stutter or aphasia. I used the wrong word even today when I'm tired, and I had to relearn how to speak. And the power behind the universe has a funny sense of humor because years 3 through 5 or 6, I ended up keynoting internationally. I didn't see that coming. I never sought out these opportunities to offer hope, but they came. So yeah, it's been an amazing journey. One that, as long as I have a heartbeat, I'll continue to be part of and try to serve those that need to be served. And to circle back to Ralph, one of your points earlier, early on after my injury, like nobody talked about brain injury. And then the movie Concussion came out, and like the whole brain injury community is like, oh my God, it's going to change the landscape. And it was a flash in the pan. It disappeared. Nobody talked about it. And there were a couple of characters that I've seen on TV that have brain injuries. My wife and I are a big fan of the TV show Ghosts. I don't think it's been renewed, but the one of the lead characters fell down a set of stairs She attained a brain injury in the form of a concussion and was able to see people in the afterlife. But they minimize that. It's not part of the narrative. So, I think for the foreseeable future, we're kind of like a whole bunch of candles on a landscape, and I've got my candle, and Ralph, you've got your candle, and there are a lot of others that are holding their candles. And kind of like moths are attracted to a light, people are going to be drawn to those candles. And I think the big thing is for all of us to keep staying the course. And, it's going to be one of these where it's going to be progress at glacial speed. Are we better off now from a big standpoint as a community than we were 5 years ago? No doubt. And if we look at where we were 5 years ago, roll back 5 more years, are we better off then? No doubt. So I expect that trend to continue, but it's just so slow. So, we'll all stay the course and just do what we can to do what we do.
Well, I'm hoping this new Gabby Giffords movie is going to put a face and a name on both TBI and aphasia, because
Tell me more. I haven't heard of it.
yeah, they're making a mainstream movie to be released in movie theaters. It's not like Fox. It's not like one of the big Hollywood studios. It's either Netflix or Amazon or one of the newer players. But it's going to be released in theaters, and hopefully, it's going to bring awareness to it. I guess Dr. Tom Broussard made me aware of the fact that he wasn't aware of the movie. I've made him aware of the movie since, but he made me aware of the fact that there really aren't any characters. I thought of this when you were talking about characters in the TV show in Ghost. We don't get to see anything. I was watching a thing on Bill Russell and what's her name from Star Trek last night, and they were talking about putting, that people get used to things when they see the faces, and if the faces of people with brain injury and aphasia aren't part of the narratives that we see in life, then we know very little about it, and we only protect what we love, and we're only empathetic about things that we can understand. So that's why it's important. Tom's working real hard to get the word aphasia into the lexicon and get people thinking about it. I've been thinking lately, like, I've amassed a bit of a community, a candle. I like that. It's funny, the similarities, David, because I made a video 35 years ago to the prayer of St. Francis, and that line is, "In giving that we receive," has been a part of my life ever since. We talked about my bike accident prior to recording. And I've always have felt that, what I'm doing isn't really about me. I mean, I ended up benefiting from it, but that, like you, it's not my motivation. There are just so many people out there that are newer on the journey, got whacked harder, dealing with more than I'm dealing with. So, just trying to provide a hand up. And, that makes me think, like, we talked about this a little bit privately, but we'll talk about it now, and that's the fact that we'd all like to see change in the recovery process. I mean, you talked about a string of neurologists that basically didn't do you a whole lot of good. We feel the same way sometimes about our physical therapists and the way the whole physical therapy thing is structured. Okay, you've been here 12 times. Thanks for paying the receptionist the other 11. You're out of here, pay her for the 12th time, because you're released. It's not that you've gotten better, it's that our insurance company metric says you're out of here. So, if we want to see change, I think that we have to somehow or another become a large enough community that they, the elusive they, are forced to listen to us. And they includes a lot of different groups and specific things. And they will all listen to us if we get big enough. But I think that number is 100,000 or 1 million. There are 8 million stroke survivors, of which 2 million have aphasia. I don't know my numbers about TBI. I'm sure there are quite a few. You may know them, but we got an awful lot of people out there, who've gone through this ringer um, of a system that we have, and it could stand improvement. So I've been trying to think about how do we all come together to put these numbers together. I don't know how to do it. I'm not trying to. I I set off on this like 6 years ago, and I thought I was the only pay it forward person out there. Ha 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 ha! I got a real surprise there. It took a year or two before I started seeing it, but I would actually guess at this point that I would say fully 25% of people end up being what I call pay it forward people. Do they form Facebook groups and everything? It might even be as much as 50% of people would do something if it was easy for
Mm.
them. Because I actually feel like stroke, and I don't know about TBI, but I know my stroke, I was an empathetic person before, but my stroke made me empathetic off the charts. And I think part of it is because it slows you down and you get to take a look around and see what's really going on around you. Like you said, you didn't know anything about TBI before you came in contact with people, it wasn't on your radar. Well, you get slowed down and you have a life-changing experience, you start to notice other people around you that have had life-changing experiences. And you also have a better understanding of what they're doing. So, um, and hope, and my whole thing, you got into hope. I got into a thing with my therapist about, she asked me if had hope for the future. And I said, well, that's a stupid question. And I said it just like that because I didn't have a filter. Uh, this was pre-stroke, but right before my stroke. I didn't have much of a filter before, so I said it like that. Well, that's a stupid question. There's always hope for the future. And she said, not everybody feel that way. Well, I ended up taking a picture about 6 weeks after my stroke. I'm a photographer, and I had like a seminal moment when I took that picture and looked at it. I realized I had one of those, all right, I can still do this, I'm going to be okay moments. I actually named the picture, There's Always Hope for the Future. It's actually, guess what? It's our group photo, only now it says you can change someone's life with a simple act of kindness, which is also true. So what are your thoughts on how we get to how do we somehow I guess I started feeling a couple of years ago like um, well 4 or 5 years ago I started to feel like I'm in Groundhog Day, but that's okay because that's part of the job. But then I started feeling like all of us out here were in Groundhog Day and we're not coordinating in any way, and we could sure put numbers together faster or have a bigger voice if we had more numbers. I'd be curious what your thoughts are on that subject and how do we go about it? I don't pretend to know. Um, I hitch my horse to your wagon. I mean, I'm not trying to get everybody to follow me. Well, I am. I started that way just because I didn't see other people doing it. Now I see lots of other people doing it. The thing that really bugs me is like American Stroke. Well, they absorbed American Heart and Stroke absorbed the folks in Colorado, National Stroke Association. They were the closest thing in a big organization that actually like had a clue and were like doing something. I don't see the big organizations doing much. I don't hear the voices. I hear the voices of the experts they hire delivering information to us that they think we ought to have. And I see this whole thing. I started this all as like kind of I use a rising tide floats all boats too, because I believe that's true. And that's the way I started as a uprising. Like if we're not happy with what we're getting dealt to us, then maybe we need to, you know, try and change the game. If they won't give us what we want, we'll figure out how to give it to each other. I mean, that's been kind of my operating principle, and I guess yours too. Trying to help other folks. What's
Yeah,
your thoughts on all
one
this?
of the one of the things that you talked about, I had I've been a staff writer for Brainline for many years, and they were based out of Alexandria, Virginia. They're actually tied in with PBS, and it's another piece of the journey that I never envisioned happening. And I've been through a number of editors over the years, and I had 2 or 3 editors ago. One of my editors said, "What you're experiencing is called post-traumatic growth." And I'd never heard the term post-traumatic growth before. And I Googled it, and the first couple of matches are scholarly articles. And kind of in a simplistic description, it's somebody who's gone through some type of extreme trauma, comes out the other side as a changed person, um, is able to see benefits of that experience, and then in many cases goes moves forward doing things like you're doing, Ralph, or things that I'm doing, or things like others are doing. And once I was exposed to that concept, I looked around the landscape of my life and went, wow, some of my closer friends, people that I know within the brain injury community, all fall into that category. So I don't necessarily think that opposites attract. People that have like-minded vision attract. And I don't think there's a really easy answer. Um, I was a sitting board member for the Brain Injury Association of New Hampshire for a couple of terms. They're a wonderful organization. They do a lot of work and they help a lot of people. But one of the things that I experienced is a lot of their work is at the legislative level. And it's work that absolutely has to be done. But it's, I remember going to a couple of board meetings and they used more acronyms than I think I'd ever heard in my life. No idea what they were talking about. And finally, at one point, one of the staffers put out a guide to, basically, it's a dictionary for acronyms. And because my processing speed remained slower than it used to be, it didn't do me much good. So you've got different levels of service. You've got serving the community from that level. But the piece that I look at is feet on the street. And Ralph, that's guys like me and you, that are out there, that are living in the communities that we serve, not because we learned about it in a textbook, but because we live it. And, the classic difference between sympathy and empathy: sympathy, I feel bad for you; empathy, I understand how you're feeling because I've been there. So we bring an entirely different perspective to the communities that we serve. And I don't have an easy answer. I know that the flames continue to get brighter, and they continue to become more numerous. Um, but I don't think there's an easy way to chart a course toward putting it all in the public spotlight. I periodically post content on the Hope Network social page that may get 50, 60, 70,000 views. It gets shared, 3, 4, 500 times. Gets a lot of traction. But the challenge is the traction is within the silo of those we serve. And, the challenge is, how do we get externalized in what we do? Part of what I've done on my own personal Facebook page is I've got a number of folks that know me professionally, a number of my clients and family members, colleagues, friends, and I wear my injury on my sleeve. And I try to be a face of, yes, you can have a brain injury and still work and still enjoy life and still do crazy stuff like take 8 hours and drive to Virginia for a 3-day holiday. You can still participate in life. And I don't know, is there a way to get more people to do that? Maybe. And I think if we can get those that are within our club, within our communities, and it's a tough one, to be more open about what they're struggling with, so that those outside of our communities see it. I think that may be a good first step. But not everybody, and you've seen it, not everybody's wired that way. Not everybody wants to say, hey, my name's David, I'm a stroke survivor. It's not, that's a path that's not for all of us. So, I don't know, I wish I had a better answer.
Well, you need troops as well as generals, so some of those people who don't want to step up can still do things where they're counted, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, well, and you've kind of alluded to search engine placement and Google domain stuff. You're working in an area where you understand whether you like it or not. And I personally, I don't like, well, I love numbers. I'm a numbers guy. I do math in my head and all that, but I don't like the whole fact that everything in life seems to be driven by the numbers anymore now that we're analyzing data, capturing people's data, selling it to other people without their knowledge and all that. And please pay the receptionist on the way out. Um, uh, you know, I, it's tough. It's tough. You know, I would love it. I had a lot of hope for National Stroke Association. They were one of the few groups that actually listened to me, and they kind of I felt like they understood what I wanted to do. I've been in touch, I haven't in 4 or 5 years now, with American Heart, American Stroke, and regionally, I offered to do free video for them. They don't get back to me. I mean, we were having a dialogue. I said, I'll do free video for you. The dialogue dies. A couple months later, you send a reminder. Nothing happens. A couple months later, you send another one. You try national. Uh, I don't know. Maybe they're not used to somebody actually being willing to do free video for them. I don't know. Maybe I'm some kind of weird anomaly. Um,
I actually, interestingly, there's two brain injury associations that serve nationally. There's a Brain Injury Association of America, and there's a Brain Injury Alliance. And the alliance, I don't know the details behind it. I think it was a difference in opinion on policy. Uh, Different states are served by different kind of national organizations. And I remember having a conversation with a gentleman at the Brain Injury Association of America, and I'd actually asked if to do a national conference. And at the time, he shared a little bit of the inner workings, and he said, actually, the Brain Injury of New Hampshire has a bigger budget and more staffers than we do on a national level. And he said a lot of people think that because we have the name national, that we've got a larger budget and more people, but in reality, many statewide associations are bigger than we are on a national level. And it was just one of those aha moments that had he not shared it, I never would have known.
well, I'm not here to pick on American Heart, American Stroke, but I guarantee you they got a couple $100,000 people running it. Seems to me a lot of the big organizations get into turf wars and existing for their own existence, as opposed to helping. And I'm not saying American Stroke doesn't help. It just doesn't seem like I don't see anybody doing anything on like kind of a what I would call a grassroots level, like you and I are doing, like the rising tide floats all boats kind of thing, a groundswell coming from us, not from the top down, but from the bottom up.
Yeah, and
Uh,
that makes the work that um, people that do what we do all the more important, because it's more than likely not going to ever happen from the top down. Um,
that's sad because that seems to me like that would be the easiest way. If there was one organization out there, that's why I had a lot of hope for National Stroke Association out of Colorado. It was funny because I talked to David Dansereau last week about this, and he felt exactly the same way about them and about them getting absorbed. It was like one of the good guys went away. Um, we got absorbed by the bigger stuff. So all the crap we got going on in corporations goes on in nonprofits as well. But the simplest thing for rallying around would be, to have some kind of national level organization with some kind of budget, power, clout, and whatever um, to center all our efforts around. If there was one, I'd throw in with them and try and get you to throw in with them. I'd be talking it up, so, because that way we could get to 100,000 or a million a lot quicker. I'm not trying to get to a million or 100,000 people so that I get rich. I'm trying to get there so that people want to buy ads on the media and such, and we can sell out the community, if you will. It's not really selling them out, but selling them out advertising wise and generate funds that then we can use to uh, fund studies and put on national conferences and such. So, I jokingly say, I'm trying to build up the numbers so I can sell out the community, but it's not for my own benefit. You understand how the whole advertising thing works because you're in search engine placement and domain stuff. And, it's back to the Google, I guess, made it happen with this whole numbers game thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
I had somebody a couple of years ago that sent me a scathing email that I was getting rich off the brain injury community. And we've got legitimate overhead because of what we do. I use a third-party list management service for magazine subscriptions. We've got cost of website hosting. There are different like real dollar expenses, and
Nope.
probably
Tell me
twice a
about it. I fund mine. I just recently formed a nonprofit. I got
yep.
I got $30,000 in the last 10 years funding, my work. Do I regret it? No. Would I do it
Oh,
again? Absolutely. But I mean,
and
that's the reality. Yeah, I had somebody. There are two things that I really, if you really want to get to me, there are two things that you could say, and one is like, and somebody told me I was making money off the backs of stroke survivors, which is absolutely not true. It ended our relationship, um, of course. Um, yeah. And the other one is, well, you must not have had a very bad stroke because I recovered so well. Well, I mean, that's just a no-no. Every stroke, every TBI is different, and you just don't compare them. And the last thing in the world that you ever do is belittle somebody over their injury. Oh, you must not have had a very bad stroke like I did.
nice,
Well,
nice, nice to see you're over it, Ralph. You look normal.
yeah, I look normal. I, when you're not normal, when you really have, sometimes when things aren't right for you, it's like you have something written on, broken, written on your forehead and everybody can see it, but we need something like that for TBI, but of course none of us want to walk around with 2-inch Sharpie marks on our forehead, brain injury survivor,
They're
be
really
careful.
hard. They're really hard to get off.
Yeah, Sharpie takes about 5 showers to get rid of. On the other hand, Dr. Broussard has like a license plate thing. It's like the size of a license plate, and it clips onto your sun visor on your car for people with aphasia. And it says, "No, I'm not drunk. I have aphasia, which is a speech disorder from my stroke. And if you get stopped by the police and you have aphasia and you have trouble talking, you can point to it." So there's certainly some validity in knowing, but they talk about TBI in some parts of stroke as hidden deficits. That's one of the most difficult things that people deal with because, well, you look okay. When are you going to get over that stroke? Oh, it's not like a cold? What do you mean you don't get over it in like a month or something? No, it's just, it doesn't work that way. It's a condition. It's not a disease. It doesn't go away. So, this is tricky stuff. I do want to say one note that I made before you even talked about Sarah, because I noticed that Sarah was a big part of helping you with your community, and I just thought about it because one of the couple of the things that people really have a hard time dealing with are the hidden deficits, and one of the worst groups for treating people badly who have hidden deficits are family, and for whatever reason, they're supposed to be supportive, but they aren't always. I had somebody say to me yesterday, I had this realization. She said, I don't have a husband or anybody to help me, and therefore I think that's making me better because in my stroke, because I'm therefore forced to do everything for myself. And I said, well, I had a talk with my own family about that, and I've also coached a couple stroke survivors. I had a guy at one of the stroke groups come up to me and say, well, look, you've gotten so much better. He wanted me to give him a little take home, a little magic bullet for his wife to get better. And I told him I would tell him, but he wouldn't like it. And he said, so I said, I'm really reluctant to tell you because you're not going to like what I have to say. And he said, well, I want to hear it. I said, well, you're going to have to promise me. I knew he might break the promise. You have to promise me that you're not going to get pissed off at the messenger for telling you. And you know what I told him? I said, you coddle your wife. I just watch you walk up the steps. You try to do all the work for her. You have to be supportive and be there for her, but you can't do it for her. You got to let her fail. You got to let her do it. I mean, that's the way it works. And so family are a lot of times really bad about unsupportive about being unsupportive, particularly to people who have hidden deficits. Aren't you done with that stroke yet? The worst example I ever heard was 2 years ago during the pandemic. A woman went home for Memorial Day. She hadn't seen her family in a while, and they were giving her a hard time about all this. And her sister actually said this to her. I wish I could have a stroke so I could show you how it's done. Yeah, shake your head. No, you don't, honey. You know, if I didn't know what I'd be wishing on her, of course, the immediate thing was, well, I'd love to give you one and just see how much fun you think it is. But of course, I'm empathetic. I've always been empathetic. I couldn't do that now, but I know what a terrible. I know what a terrible thing it is, and I also know what a terrible thing that would be to say to somebody. Um, but you're really lucky to have a support. That's why I started this, to have Sarah be so supportive of you and like husband number, David number two, not husband number two. Well, she likes husband number two, version number two, David number two, because I understand she runs your Facebook community for you, so she's correct. So,
No, actually, she doesn't. These days she co-facilitates a family member support group.
oh, okay.
Yep,
I knew
and
she was involved in the work. You're really lucky to have, I mean, people who've had, and Dr. Hetzler has a very supportive spouse, but there are a lot of people out there who don't. And, you're really lucky to have somebody who not only is supporting you as a person, but believes in the work you're doing.
yeah,
And
but the
not even to the point that she lets you do it without bugging you. The fact that, she gets involved in it, that's a whole next level.
yeah, the casualty count, though, from a family standpoint, is still stunningly high.
Mm-hmm.
I have no memories of 2011. I lost most of the entire year, and I've got fragments of memories through 2012. I look at pictures from that time, and I was there, but I just don't have any recall. And apparently, and it's a tough one to accept. I had, because the filter was gone. Sarah recalls me leaving a couple of my son's rather unfriendly voicemail messages, um, based on. Um, uh, um, Actually, I don't want to get into the details. My reaction was not proportionate; it was inappropriate. But I didn't have a filter. And if I fast forward to today, my three of my four sons have walked out of my life, and had, over the first several years, there were multiple attempts to reach out by phone, by text, send cards on their birthdays, and I was met with a wall of silence. Not even "Dad, you were a jerk because you did this," just nothing, and it's left this entire void where I don't know what I did, and it's hard to make amends for behavior that you don't recall. So yeah, it's not just spouses. One of my sons just had a daughter, and it's a granddaughter that we've not had the opportunity to know. So yeah, but part of it is, the losses happen and they hurt, and I do not have rose-colored glasses. Oh, this is a wonderful thing because I can use it to help somebody. These are primal pains, but
No, that
you process the pain, and you come out the other side, and acceptance takes a long time.
I don't know what to say, and I got a big old that's sad. I got a big old lump in my throat, and I don't know what to say. I, first thought was, give me their phone numbers, I'll call them up. But that, we all know that wouldn't do any good. I hope you can at some point resolve it.
Yeah, Sarah says all the time, you remain open to to reconciliation and live as your best possible as your best possibly able. And she has hope after 8 or 9 years of not hearing back. I try to be realistic, and it took me a while to get to the point of I may not ever hear back, and it try not to focus on that because it's
I know,
heartbreaking.
but it's sad for your granddaughter. It's sad for the children that'll come out of it because they should know their grandparents. So families are important.
Yeah, but eventually they'll grow older, and social media being what it is, they may seek us
Do
out.
an end run. Yep,
Yep. Yep. So what is life? There's hope.
that's true. There's always hope for the future.
Yeah.
Um, does anybody out there have just any questions they want to ask David, or any discussion points they want to talk about? Looks like
Well,
Dr.
I could ask something perhaps.
Sure.
David, you mentioned, I think that the the CT scans apparently showed no damage, and so the neurologist said you'd be fine. Is that correct?
That's exactly what I was told.
That is given the personality change, which, from what little I know, may have involved problems with your prefrontal cortex, and the memory problems, either from damage to the hippocampus or diencephalon. I'm surprised nothing showed up. And I wonder, did they do an MRI that might have shown more?
They did not. And one of the odd the whole journey has been fascinating. The CAT scan was literally right after my accident. I have not had an MRI since. And at that window of time, if to put a push pin in the linear timeline, like I was literally hours away from being injured. But a lot of my behavioral changes are consistent with frontal lobe damage.
Yes.
And one of the pieces that I wrestled with, because there are silver linings to almost everything, and it falls into the you can't make this up category. I dealt with seasonal depression for my entire adult life. I was on SSRIs for a number of years. When the days would start getting shorter in September, I could feel the creep of depression come in. And I had many winters where it was debilitating. I did cognitive therapy, again, SSRIs, everything that the powers that be say is the right thing to do, and I was still dogged by it. Post-injury, my depression was virtually eliminated and gone, just totally gone, like a cloud had lifted. And it's like, and I'm gonna be very candid, you can't think your way out of diarrhea. You've either got it or you don't, and you can't think your way out of clinical depression. I was diagnosed by several healthcare providers, and I noticed that as the days started to get shorter, I didn't have that ominous feeling that life was going to get very difficult. And that's very much in alignment with that. They used to use lobotomies to treat depression. Targeted damage to frontal lobes, if it was done perfectly, would alleviate depression. And what amounts to just an odd twist of fate, it appears that based on the immediate elimination of my symptoms, that my damage occurred at the sweet spot that wiped the depression off the landscape of my life. And still to this day, every fall, at least once, I'll have an aha moment and go,
Uh-oh.
"Oh my goodness!" It's late October, and damn, I feel good. And I battled with depression for decades. So yeah, that was the potential microscopic damage that subsequently turned into scar tissue. That's the only definition that I heard that made any sense. And again, I don't know if that's even a thing, but I hang my hat on it because it checks all the boxes.
Interesting. But lobotomies turned out to be a disaster.
Oh,
People that had them were generally unemployable.
yep.
It was done on one of the Kennedy daughters, and I think she may have died as a result. A lot of people died from them also, and there's an unfortunate history of that where it became a an office visit procedure
Yeah.
where they
It's
basically knock an ice pick up in your orbital socket and swing it back and forth and sever the frontal lobe. It was just a disaster.
Yeah, she was the Kennedy daughter was institutionalized for the remainder of her life, and she was kind of the quiet family secret. And
Yes,
there's a if you're in the mood to learn about it, there's a PBS special that talks about it. That's absolutely mortifying. So yeah, in that respect, I'm a lucky guy. So
yes,
yeah,
very. Now it's interesting. I'm sorry about the personality changes you had. I had a major stroke in my right thalamus. You may not know the structures of the brain, and also damage to the internal capsule, which is a descending motor pathway. But I was put into a drug-induced coma for 8 days after a neurosurgeon drilled a hole in my head and put a tube in to drain out the blood from the hemorrhage. And as the uh, as the drugs were wearing off, my wife was told she'd better prepare herself that I would not be the same person if I survived. And that turned out to be wrong. I'm still the same smart aleck.
And
Uh,
folks,
you could, uh, that I was before. My personality did not change at all. I ended up with motor problems on the left side of my body. That's from the internal capsule damage. But anyway, so one neurologist told my wife I'd be a different person, and your neurologist said, "Oh, you're fine," and your personality changed. So
yeah,
they don't always know exactly what's going on.
that's true. And David, Dr. Hetzler is a PhD neuroscientist who taught neuroscience for
43
46,
years.
43.
43 years.
That's
Yeah, and
right.
interestingly, after my stroke, um, I went back to teaching 6 months later, but I had to take an 8 hour neuropsychological test first to show that I still had my cognitive abilities and could teach. And I passed that with flying colors and was able to return 6 months later when I was physically strong enough to do so.
mhm.
And
Wow,
David,
that's remarkable.
did you follow up with somebody else and get that cognitive test done every year?
I actually became quite disillusioned with the healthcare that I was receiving, and learned that I can learn more from members of the survivor community than I can from many members of the professional community. I try not to ever slight those that are in the profession. And again, I
Yeah.
mentioned it earlier, the doc that initially saw me um, was repeating what he had learned. I was in to see another doctor, I think 3 or 4 years out because of the PTSD. And my wife and I went in and explained the symptoms. And my stepson had seen him for migraines. He was also a neurologist and had very good luck with migraine treatments. And his calling card said brain injury. Brain injury is an area of expertise. And we went in for the intake interview, and he said, "You don't have a brain injury at all. You have sleep apnea, and you're waking up screaming because your levels are going low, and it's a primal reaction to suffocation." And he put me on one of the CPAP machines, and I rode that pony for I think 4 or 5 months. And there's nothing worse than having a CPAP strapped to your face, still waking up in abject terror. And that proved not to be helpful at all. So he's the last time I saw a doc. And today I'm okay with it. And the piece in for anybody who's been around for a while, uh, brain injury old timers, you get to a point where you go, this is what I have. I'm intimately familiar with my deficits, and I'm okay with what I have. And that took me, 9 or 10 years to get to that point. But once I get to that, I'm okay with what I have. there's no need to really flip over any stones. No.
You mentioned sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is fairly common for stroke survivors to have after their stroke.
Mhm.
Now, I had sleep apnea before my stroke and still have it now afterwards. And I have the CPAP on every night, and it's useful. I live in Appleton, Wisconsin, which is very near Green Bay. And I don't remember how many years ago, maybe 15 years ago, a Green Bay Packer football player, uh, Reggie White, I think was his name. He was defensive lineman. He died from sleep apnea, and that greatly increased the amount of people that got sleep apnea CPAP machines here in Wisconsin.
Well, the doctors will. I mean, it's a go-to thing if you've had a stroke or if you come up with AFib or anything. I mean, I mean, they'll ask you, in a heartbeat if you had a sleep test. They did it with me, and first sleep test revealed that I had it. The second one revealed that I really didn't have it. I continued on. I did CPAP for a year. Then they stuck me on a BiPAP machine for 3 days. It did the same thing. And finally, I found a sleep doctor who was a neurologist and a DO. And I like both of those things rather than a pulmonologist, which most of them are. About 80% are pulmonologists, 10% are internal medicine, about 10% are neurologists. She checked all my boxes. It was a female. I find females listen. DO, I like the natural aspect, and a neurologist. She finally said, there's one more machine, the SLV machine or something that you could try, but you're at 5. I was at 5.2 or something. He said, we don't even treat people below 5. You went along with me to find this whole thing out. Basically what happened was I had mild obstructive sleep apnea. I was concerned about it because my father slept with a CPAP machine for the last 25 years of his life. But basically, I didn't have it very badly, and I ended up with, instead of having like 10 events an hour, I ended up with 40 events an hour, and they were all central sleep apnea. We weren't obstructive. So what was happening was the machines were pumping my brain so full of oxygen. This is what the neurologist told me. He said, we're pumping you so full of oxygen, so full of air that your brain is shutting down breathing. It's not central. So there was this one more machine, and I just said, well, look, I went along, this ride for a while. When you told me originally I could walk out the door, I said, now I'm going to walk out the door. Because, my wife had said, I don't hear him waking up. I don't hear him stopping breathing. I've never snored. So I make other stroke survivors aware of this because it was real interesting because I kind of diagnosed it myself. Actually, when getting back to the doctors, no doctor knows what's going on with you unless you tell them. So you're the depository of all the best information about yourself. I wasn't happy with this whole thing going from 10 to 40. So I kept trying to figure it out because I'm from an engineering family. So I asked for the software for the machine because I wanted to get readouts and stuff. Well, you couldn't do it was limited what they'd let consumers have. Yeah, I mentioned it to the respiratory therapist that had the machine. She said, that's really interesting because I have 3 other people that have complained about the same symptoms as you, central sleep apnea and going up. And so without violating HIPAA or telling me anybody's name, the next time I saw her a month later, she said she checked with all 3 of them and all 3 of them had strokes. Yeah. So I don't know what the connection is, but there's something there to.
Well, and what you're hitting on is self-advocacy.
Yeah.
My dad is still with us. He'll be 89 next month, and he's of that generation that if you're told something by somebody in a white coat, it's gospel. And
not for me. My mom was like that.
Yep, and I think it's a generational thing. It's absolutely a respect thing. but I've learned over the years that I have a voice and to trust my intuition. And if something doesn't feel right, to question it, that old question authority. And your experience is perfect in that, you can take that and say, okay, here's what I went through. And if you go public with it in certain circles, you can help elevate the quality of lives of other folks.
Oh yeah, I have a paragraph about it when sleep apnea comes up in the stroke groups. I copy and paste that paragraph. And one of the things I was asked to give I call it, it's a progression. I was asked to give, ended up giving 5 talks. What happened, what to do about it's the first one. And in that one, basically, I bring up 2 really important concepts if you're any kind of survivor. When that's number 1, you have to become your own patient advocate because the cavalry's not coming. Back in the 50s, you could get your doctor to call up your other doctor. Try that today. Ha 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 ha. They see in a little 10 by 10 examining room, when they walk out the door, they don't think about you or do anything about you till the next time you come in and they walk back in that examining room. The cavalry's not coming. And if you think that, people who haven't had a stroke can know everything that there is to know about a stroke, I think you're delusional. So I try and preach that you have to become your own patient advocate. I mean, I carry it in that presentation. I talk about somebody who was all pissed off that they went to the neurologist and they didn't have the CAT scans. You know what I wrote on their post in one of the Facebook groups? You're bad. I check with the imaging people and make sure they've sent them, and I check with the doctor and make sure they've received them. And if they don't, I circle back and fix the problem. I mean, I just don't rely on anybody for anything. So I try and teach people that you have to become your own best patient advocate. And the same thing's true for physical therapy. Start picking your physical therapist's brain from the day you meet them, and start talking about setting up your own home program and working with them on a home program for when, not if, you get cut off from insurance. It's going to happen. And if you start planning the week before it happens, you're in a whole different situation than if you plan all along that, if you know and plan all along that you're going to get released from insurance and it won't reset till next January and that you're going to be on your own. We're on our own a lot. I mean, the system is broken and it's getting worse. I hear about people getting 10, 12, 16, 20 visits now. I got 30 just 10 years ago. So they're cutting down the number of visits. You can talk to physical therapists about this. They say, we want to help these people, but it's kind of like a revolving door. We know they're going to be gone before we can really do them all the good that they need to be done to them. Well, that's a disincentive. I mean, if I had patients that were going to be gone before I could help them, that's kind of, it's a disincentive.
My wife Sarah had some back trouble earlier this year and was in physical therapy, and migrated to doing her therapy at home. And part of the reason behind it is she was getting very close to the maximum number that insurance would allow, and she wanted to keep a couple of cards in the deck in case she had to go back again. So she basically pulled a couple of visits out and put them in a reserve in the event she needed them. And Ralph, I do have a favor. I've got a 12:30
Oh
client
yeah, no,
call scheduled.
we saw.
Yeah, I apologize for
Oh
that.
no, don't apologize. We've gone long, so I appreciate you giving up your time between the Hope Network and networks and working and having a life. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to talk to us. And so I don't know. I'm thinking about your sons.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what I could do to get your sons back in line. I know there's nothing, just that empathy,
Yeah.
When you're
But again,
empathetic, you want to fix all wrongs. I do anyway.
Yeah, but again, where there's life, there's hope, and I still have, yeah, the spark is still there.
That's right. So we'll leave it with my, outraged line to my therapist. There's always hope for the future. That's a stupid question.
All righty, thank
All
you
right.
all.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure being here today.
Well, thank you so much for having us, for being coming and being with us.
All right, thank you guys.
All right. Bye now. I make it all the way through and screw up the last line. Oh well.